The planet of Taurith was a war zone, a place where two alien factions had been locked in a brutal battle for control over the planet's precious resources for years. The air was thick with the scent of burning debris, and the sky was streaked with the red glow of explosions as massive warships engaged in dogfights above the surface. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the barren wasteland, and the ground was littered with the remains of fallen soldiers, some alien, others human. Taurith was considered a strategic point, a key to controlling the sector. But for the soldiers fighting on the ground, it had become a graveyard. No one expected this war to end anytime soon. No one, that is, until a strange, unexpected signal was received by one of the alien factions. It wasn't an army reinforcement or an incoming warship. It was a transmission, a message for one of the commanders. Mercenary for hire, Captain Riker. Human. Job. Change the battlefield. The message was brief but clear. The alien commander, General Lether, sat in the dim light of his command center, staring at the strange transmission with growing curiosity. Humans were not known for their fighting prowess in the galaxy. They were weak compared to the ancient alien races who had mastered space travel and energy manipulation. Humans were often laughed at, seen as insignificant. Yet this message spoke of a human capable of turning the tide of a battle, of changing the course of a war in an instant. The thought was absurd. Lether pushed the button, ordering his officers to locate the signal source. Moments later, a small, sleek drop pod was detected descending rapidly toward the battlefield. Its appearance was sudden, unexpected, and unlike anything the alien forces had seen before. In a flash, it landed with a thundering crash near the front lines. "Is this the so-called human mercenary?" Lether muttered, half doubting. A single soldier arriving amidst a full-scale war. Meanwhile, on the ground, a young alien soldier, Zarek, watched the drop pod touch down with growing unease. His unit was stationed nearby, and he was supposed to be scouting the area for enemy activity. He was no veteran, just a recruit eager to prove himself, and he had no idea who or what could be arriving in the mysterious pod. "Sir, we've got an unidentified pod landing at coordinates X39. Zarek's comm unit buzzed as he reported the strange event to his superior officer. The officer's voice crackled through the comm. "Keep your distance, Zarek. It could be a trap. Just stay alert." Zarek nodded but couldn't help his curiosity. As the pod's hatch opened, he saw the figure emerge. His breath caught in his throat. The human was tall, easily taller than most of the aliens around him. His exosuit was a dark, sleek piece of armor, blending advanced technology with brute strength. The helmet hid his face, but the figure's posture was undeniable. He exuded an air of confidence, the kind of confidence that only came from years of survival in the galaxy's most dangerous environments. The human stood still for a moment, scanning the battlefield. His eyes, hidden beneath the helmet's visor, seemed to take in every detail. Then, without a word, he unslung a high-tech sniper rifle from his back and activated a cloaking device. "Did you see that?" Zarek whispered to his comrade, his voice filled with disbelief. The human had just disappeared before his eyes, vanishing like smoke into the air. "I don't know what we're dealing with here," the officer replied, a hint of unease in his tone. "But if that human wants to fight, let him. We've got more important things to focus on." Zarek couldn't shake the feeling that this human wasn't just another soldier. This wasn't going to be like any other battle he had fought. The way the human moved, the way his armor seemed to blend into the surroundings. It was as if he had the power to control the battlefield itself. And as the day wore on, Zarek realized that he was right to be uneasy. Back at the command center, General Lether and his officers watched in silence as the strange human made his presence felt. Riker, the human mercenary, didn't waste time. Within minutes, the first alien squad was down. Their bodies were strewn across the ground, shot with precision from the cloaked mercenary's sniper rifle. The shots were silent, swift, and deadly. No alien even had a chance to react. "What in the galaxy?" Lether muttered, his eyes wide with shock. "This human, he's not like any mercenary I've ever seen." The alien officers looked at one another, clearly unsettled. "This can't be real," one of them said. "A single human changing the battle? It's impossible." But Lether knew better. He had seen many wars, and he had seen many mercenaries. Some had been skilled, others not so much, but none of them had ever made such an impact in such a short time. This human was something different, and Lether couldn't afford to underestimate him. "I want him alive," Lether said, his voice sharp with command. "We need to know what makes him tick. If he can change the course of this war, we need him on our side." Back on the battlefield, Riker was already making his presence felt in ways that no one could have expected. His first target had been a group of heavily armored aliens moving toward the front lines. Within seconds, he had taken them out, each shot hitting its mark with deadly accuracy. The aliens had no idea where the shots were coming from. It was as if the human was everywhere at once. But Riker wasn't just about stealth. The next wave of alien soldiers, heavily armed and in full combat gear, rushed toward his position. They thought they could overwhelm him with sheer numbers, but they were wrong. Riker activated his exosuit's thrusters, propelling himself into the air with an explosive burst. As he soared above the enemy, he unleashed a barrage of explosive grenades, sending alien soldiers flying in all directions. The explosion was deafening, and the battlefield shifted once again, this time in humanity's favor. As the alien forces began to regroup, Riker landed with a soft thud, his boots kicking up dust as he scanned the battlefield. His exosuit's enhanced vision allowed him to pick out targets in the distance with pinpoint precision. A group of aliens was hiding behind a large rock formation, preparing to launch an attack on his allies. Riker didn't hesitate. With a flick of his wrist, he sent a missile streaking toward the formation, obliterating the cover and causing a chain reaction of explosions. Within moments, the alien forces began to falter. Their carefully laid plans were unraveling, and confusion spread like wildfire. Riker's ability to move swiftly and strike decisively had turned the tide. No longer were they in control, and no longer did they have the upper hand. Back at the command center, General Lether slammed his fist against the table in frustration. "This is impossible. How is one human doing this?" But Lether wasn't an idiot. He knew that the tide of war was shifting in front of his eyes, and it was no longer a question of whether the human could turn the battle. He already had. It was now a matter of survival. The other alien factions had underestimated humanity before, but they were about to learn a harsh lesson. Lether's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp voice on the comms. "Sir, we've got reports of enemy reinforcements on their way. We can't hold this position much longer." Lether took a deep breath and gripped the edge of the table, forcing himself to stay calm. "I don't care about reinforcements. We hold this position at all costs. The human may be a threat, but we're not finished yet." The mercenaries' work was far from done. As Riker continued to dismantle the alien forces, his thoughts were focused on one thing: victory. He wasn't here to prove a point, and he wasn't here for glory. He was here to get the job done, no matter what the cost. In the midst of the chaos, Riker knew something the aliens didn't. The battlefield was never about size or strength. It was about knowing how to fight, and how to win. And Riker was the best at that. The battlefield was in chaos. The alien forces had never expected a human mercenary to be capable of such destruction. Captain Riker was no ordinary soldier. His presence was like a storm, sudden and fierce, changing everything in its path. The air was filled with the sounds of explosions, laser fire, and the screams of alien soldiers who were quickly realizing they were outmatched. From his vantage point high above the battlefield, Riker observed the chaos below. His exosuit was equipped with a highly advanced targeting system that allowed him to see everything in perfect detail. Through the visor of his helmet, He watched as the alien soldiers scrambled, trying to reorganize and retaliate, but they were far too disorganized. They had never faced anything like this before. Riker didn't waste time. He'd been hired to make a difference, and that was exactly what he was going to do. He activated his exosuit's thrusters and shot through the sky, faster than the alien soldiers could react. The entire landscape of the battle shifted in an instant. Riker's movements were fast, fluid, and precise. The aliens on the ground barely had time to process what was happening before they were falling, one by one. His first target was a group of alien soldiers who had taken cover behind a crumbling building. They had set up heavy weapons and were preparing to launch an attack on the human troops in the distance. They didn't even know Riker was there. He activated his cloaking device, turning invisible, and silently approached them from behind. When he was within range, he made his move. The first shot rang out, and an alien soldier dropped to the ground, dead before he even knew what hit him. The rest of the group spun around in confusion, searching for the source of the shot, but by then, Riker was already moving again, picking off each soldier with deadly precision. In just seconds, the entire group was wiped out, their bodies lying motionless on the ground. From the command center, General Lether watched the chaos unfold. He was furious. His forces, the best-trained soldiers in the galaxy, were being slaughtered by a single human. It was a humiliation he had never imagined possible. He turned to his officers, his voice sharp with anger. "Send in reinforcements. We need to neutralize him. Now." But the reinforcements didn't arrive in time. Riker was already on the move again. He sprinted across the battlefield, using the cover of the wreckage and the smoke to stay hidden. His movements were quick, his senses sharp. The alien soldiers were disoriented, unsure of where he would strike next. Riker didn't care about playing fair. War wasn't about fairness, it was about winning. And right now, he was winning. He was the storm that had come to destroy everything in its path. As he moved, he activated a series of explosive devices that sent shockwaves through the battlefield, sending alien soldiers flying in all directions. The explosions were timed perfectly, creating chaos and confusion among the alien ranks. The alien forces were scrambling to adjust, but it was clear they were out of their depth. Riker wasn't just a mercenary. He was a force of nature. His experience in combat, combined with the advanced technology at his disposal, made him an unstoppable force on the battlefield. The aliens were learning this lesson the hard way. Back on the front lines, Zarek, the young alien soldier, watched in disbelief as the human continued to wreak havoc on his comrades. Zarek had been part of the initial assault, and he had seen many battles. He had fought alongside some of the most elite soldiers in the galaxy, but nothing had prepared him for this. The human was everywhere, striking from all angles, and there was nothing his squad could do to stop him. "Sir, we've got a problem," Zarek reported to his officer, his voice shaking with fear. "The human mercenary is wiping out our forces. We need help now." His officer, a seasoned veteran named Commander Varen, looked out across the battlefield, his face grim. "I see it," Varen said, "but our reinforcements are still far away. We can't hold this position much longer. We need to regroup and fight smarter." Zarek's heart pounded in his chest. He had always been confident in his skills, but facing off against Riker was different. It was as if the human knew exactly how to exploit every weakness in their strategy. Every move they made, the human was there, turning it against them. Riker's next move was just as devastating. He had identified a group of alien commanders who were trying to coordinate the retreat of their remaining forces. These commanders were protected by elite bodyguards, but Riker had no intention of letting them escape. He knew that if the commanders got away, the aliens would regroup and continue the fight. The battle would never end, and his job would never be finished. He used his cloaking device again, moving silently through the battlefield until he was right behind the commanders. The bodyguards didn't even have a chance to react. Riker's sniper rifle fired once, twice, and in the span of just a few seconds, all the bodyguards were dead, their bodies crumpling to the ground in a heap. The commanders, shocked and confused, tried to draw their weapons, but it was already too late. Riker was faster. He dropped down from the shadows, landing silently on the ground, and with a few quick, precise strikes, he incapacitated the remaining commanders. His work was methodical, ruthless, and efficient. "General Lether will be furious," one of the commanders muttered, his voice filled with panic. "General Lether won't be able to do anything if he's dead," Riker replied coldly, his voice muffled by his helmet. He wasn't here to play games. He was here to win, and he wouldn't stop until he had achieved that goal. Back at the command center, Lether's fury reached its peak. "I want that human dead," he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. "Send everything we got at him. Throw every ship, every soldier, every weapon at him. He won't escape this." Lether's orders were clear, but they came too late. Riker had already accomplished what he had set out to do. The alien forces were in disarray, their command structure shattered. Their morale was broken. The human had changed the course of the battle in ways no one could have predicted. Riker's work wasn't done, though. He knew that this battle was just the beginning. The aliens would regroup, and more reinforcements would come, but Riker wasn't afraid. He thrived in chaos. He was a soldier, and he knew how to turn the tide of any battle. He had done it before, and he would do it again. As the alien forces struggled to reorganize, Riker's next move was already in motion. His exosuit's sensors picked up an incoming enemy warship, a massive battleship that had been sent to assist the alien forces. The ship was still far off, but Riker knew that if it reached the battlefield, it could tip the scales in the aliens' favor. He couldn't let that happen. Riker activated his suit's thrusters once more, launching himself into the sky with a powerful burst of energy. He shot toward the battleship at breakneck speed. His mind focused on one thing: destroying the ship before it could reach the planet's surface. As he neared the battleship, Riker deployed a series of homing missiles from his suit. The missiles locked onto the battleship's hull, and with a series of explosive blasts, Riker sent the massive warship spiraling out of control. The ship exploded in a shower of debris, the shockwave rocking the entire battlefield. Back on the ground, the alien soldiers watched in stunned disbelief. Their reinforcements had just been destroyed in seconds. Their hopes of victory had been dashed. Riker's storm had come, and it had torn through their ranks without mercy. For Riker, it wasn't about glory or fame. It was about getting the job done. He didn't care about the politics of war or the reasons behind the battle. He was a mercenary, and his only concern was finishing what he had started. As the dust settled on the battlefield, the remaining alien forces began to retreat, their morale shattered. Riker had done what no one thought was possible. He had turned the tide of battle, and in doing so, he had sent a powerful message: never underestimate a human mercenary. The first light of dawn had just broken over the war-torn landscape when Riker made his move. The chaos of the battlefield had momentarily settled, but the silence was not the calm before the storm. It was the quiet before the deadly alien counterattack that was now inevitable. The alien forces, reeling from Riker's relentless assault, were not about to let their pride and their numbers be crushed by a single human mercenary. General Lether, enraged but determined, had ordered a full counterattack, throwing everything he had left into the fight. Riker stood alone at the edge of a shattered ridge, overlooking the alien forces as they regrouped. His exosuit hummed with energy as it absorbed his commands, ready for whatever the aliens had planned next. His visor's heads-up display provided him with constant updates, showing troop movements, enemy positions, and weapon systems. It wasn't just a battlefield anymore. It was his canvas, and Riker was the artist, painting destruction with every movement. The alien soldiers had learned from their previous mistakes. They had adapted, regrouping with a new strategy, one that was more coordinated and deadly. The elite alien shock troops, armored and heavily armed, were deployed first. They moved with precision, forming a wall of steel and energy, intent on crushing anything in their path. Behind them came the alien drones, hovering, automated machines that swarmed the battlefield like angry wasps. These drones were programmed to track and hunt down enemies with brutal efficiency. The aliens had also launched several powerful warships from orbit, their cannons primed and ready to rain destruction down on the human position. Riker watched it all unfold from his vantage point. He had expected this. Alien forces would never simply retreat in the face of defeat. They were coming at him with everything they had, and it was time to show them that nothing could stop a human mercenary who had set his mind to a mission. He activated the thrusters in his exosuit, launching himself high into the air, a blur against the darkening sky. From this height, the battlefield was laid out like a checkerboard, and Riker was about to make the most important move of the game. The first target was the alien shock troops. These were the most dangerous of the alien soldiers, each one carrying enough firepower to level a building. Riker couldn't afford to let them reach the human forces. He dropped from the sky like a comet, landing in the middle of the shock troops with a thunderous crash. The shock troops barely had time to react before Riker was upon them, moving with a speed and grace that was almost impossible to follow. His advanced targeting system picked off alien soldiers with pinpoint accuracy, each shot a deadly confirmation that Riker was in control of the battlefield. His rifle was an extension of his will, and it tore through the aliens' defenses as if they were paper. But the aliens weren't done yet. As Riker mowed down their elite troops, the remaining forces launched their counteroffensive. The drones filled the sky, their mechanical whirring deafening as they closed in on Riker's position. He was surrounded, but that didn't faze him. If anything, it only made the fight more exciting. Riker engaged his suit's cloaking device, becoming invisible to the drone's sensors. The drones frantically searched the area, their sensors scanning every inch of the terrain, but Riker had already moved. In a blur, he reappeared behind them, activating a set of EMP grenades that fried the drone circuits in an instant. The sky was filled with sparks and the sound of mechanical failure as the drones fell from the sky, crashing into the ground in pieces. But even as Riker eliminated the drones, the alien warships continued to close in. These massive ships, bristling with weapons, were designed to obliterate entire cities. Their guns locked onto Riker's position, and for a moment, it seemed as though nothing could stop them. Yet Riker wasn't done. He wasn't just a mercenary. He was a strategist. He knew how to use the terrain to his advantage. The moment the warships fired, Riker activated his suit's defense systems, deploying a massive energy shield that absorbed the incoming blasts. The impact sent a shockwave through the battlefield, but Riker was unharmed. The warships were momentarily stunned by the shield's power, and that was all the time Riker needed. Riker's eyes narrowed as he activated the suit's thrusters once more, propelling himself toward the closest warship. The alien forces, still reeling from his earlier attacks, were too slow to respond. Riker's trajectory was perfect. He hit the ship's hull with the force of a meteor, and with a single strike, his suit's weapons tore through the ship's outer defenses. The warship's interior was a labyrinth of metallic corridors and armored rooms. Riker fought his way through the ship, cutting down any alien soldier that stood in his way. The aliens had hoped their technological superiority would intimidate him, but they were wrong. Riker was a soldier, and he had one advantage that the aliens couldn't match: determination. As he made his way deeper into the heart of the warship, Riker's HUD flashed with critical information. The warship's core was ahead, and with it, the ship's most vital systems. Destroying it would cripple the entire ship, making it useless. But the deeper Riker went, the stronger the alien resistance became. They were throwing everything they had at him, but Riker's suit absorbed their firepower with ease. He was a one-man army, and nothing would stop him. Finally, Riker reached the ship's core, a massive chamber filled with alien energy sources and reactor systems. He planted a series of explosives around the room, knowing it wouldn't be long before reinforcements arrived. As he activated the detonators, he sprinted back toward the exit, narrowly avoiding an alien soldier who tried to block his path. The explosion rocked the entire ship as it began to tear itself apart. The warship was done, and so were the hopes of the alien forces who had counted on it. Back on the battlefield, the remaining alien soldiers were scrambling, trying to reorganize, but it was too late. Riker had already shifted the tide of the battle once again. The alien forces, their shock troops eliminated, their drones destroyed, and their warships in flames, were on the verge of complete collapse. Zarek, the young alien soldier, had watched it all unfold with growing fear. He had been trained for combat, but no amount of training had prepared him for the sheer brutality of Riker's attack. He had lost count of how many of his comrades had fallen in the wake of the humans' onslaught. Zarek had been part of the assault against the humans, but now it felt like everything was slipping away. The once proud alien forces, with their advanced technology and overwhelming numbers, were being dismantled by one man. Zarek knew the battle was lost. General Lether would never admit it, but Zarek could see it in his eyes. The humans had turned the battlefield into a slaughterhouse, and the alien forces had no hope of recovering. In the end, the human mercenary had proven that no matter how advanced an army was, it was the will to fight that mattered most. And Riker had that in spades. The alien counterattack had been fierce, but it was futile. Riker had once again proven that the most dangerous weapon on the battlefield wasn't technology. It was the human spirit. The aliens would regroup and fight again, but this battle had been lost, and Riker was already preparing for the next one. The battlefield had turned into a hellscape. Ruined cities smoldered in the distance, with the smoke of destruction hanging heavy in the air. Riker had already proven himself more than capable of tearing through the alien forces, but now, the true heart of the conflict was about to unfold. The alien warship, a towering symbol of their might, still hovered above the battlefield. It was massive, an unstoppable fortress in the sky, and it was Riker's next target. The warship wasn't just a ship, it was the key to the alien forces' survival. The ship's advanced weaponry could wipe out entire cities in a single strike, and it was their last hope of turning the tide of the battle. If Riker could take it down, the aliens would be finished, their forces scattered and demoralized. But this wouldn't be easy. The warship was heavily guarded by elite alien troops, automated defense drones, and most importantly, the alien commanders who had ordered this invasion. Riker knew what he was up against, but he wasn't the type to back down from a challenge. As Riker looked up at the warship, his mind worked quickly, calculating his next move. He could feel the weight of the situation on his shoulders, but his resolve never wavered. He wasn't just fighting for victory. He was fighting to prove that even against impossible odds, humanity would always stand tall. The alien forces thought they could crush Earth's defenders with their overwhelming technology, but Riker had already shown them that there was more to a fight than just weapons and numbers. The alien warship was now descending slowly, its engines thrumming with power. From its belly, hundreds of smaller dropships began to deploy, each one carrying more troops to reinforce the battlefield. Riker could see them, elite soldiers, heavily armored and armed with devastating energy weapons. These soldiers were the best the aliens had to offer, and they weren't about to let some human mercenary spoil their victory. They were on a mission to protect the warship at all costs, and they would stop at nothing to do so. Riker activated his exosuit, which hummed to life as its powerful engines and systems came online. The suit was an extension of his own body, allowing him to move faster, strike harder, and survive longer than any normal soldier. The warship above him was the key to this entire conflict, and Riker wasn't about to let it fall into the hands of the aliens. He had fought long and hard to get here, and now he would finish what he started. The moment the dropships landed, the battlefield erupted in chaos. Alien soldiers poured out of their ships, firing their weapons indiscriminately at anything that moved. Riker was already in motion, using the cover of nearby ruins to stay out of sight. He knew that the aliens had superior firepower, but he also knew they weren't used to dealing with a human who could think on his feet and adapt on the fly. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a problem solver, and he had learned how to exploit his enemy's weaknesses. Riker's first move was to disable the alien drones that were swarming the area. He knew they would be a major threat if left unchecked. With a flick of his wrist, he deployed an EMP grenade, which exploded with a pulse of energy that fried the circuits of the drones. They fell from the sky, their sensors dead, and their weapons useless. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. Riker needed to build momentum to keep the pressure on the aliens and force them to react. He moved quickly, staying low to the ground as he engaged the alien soldiers. His exosuit's targeting system locked onto the first soldier in his path, and with a squeeze of the trigger, Riker sent a pulse of energy that knocked the alien off its feet. The alien tried to return fire, but Riker was already gone, disappearing into the shadows like a ghost. As the alien soldiers began to regroup and press forward, Riker used his surroundings to his advantage. He sprinted up a nearby wall, using the height to get a better vantage point. From here, he could see the entire battlefield. The alien forces were spread out in a loose formation, trying to encircle his position. They were good, but they weren't good enough. Riker had already anticipated their moves and was several steps ahead. He jumped from his perch, landing behind a group of alien soldiers. In a blur of motion, he fired off a burst of energy, taking them out before they even realized what was happening. As their bodies crumpled to the ground, Riker moved on, continuing his relentless assault. The alien forces were beginning to panic. They had expected a quick victory, but instead, they found themselves caught in a battle they were losing. Their commanders tried to rally their troops, but Riker's unpredictable tactics were throwing their plans into disarray. The more the aliens tried to adjust, the more Riker outmaneuvered them. Every time they thought they had him cornered, he was already gone, striking from a new angle. The warship above continued its descent, and Riker knew time was running out. If he didn't act soon, the aliens would be able to deploy their full force, and the battle would be lost. He needed to take out the warship's defenses, and fast. Riker sprinted toward the heart of the battlefield, where the alien commanders were overseeing the fight. These were the true leaders of the alien invasion, the ones who had coordinated the assault on Earth. They were heavily protected by a squad of elite soldiers, and getting to them would be no easy task. But Riker wasn't the type to back down from a fight. He was already moving, his mind racing, as he calculated his next move. He activated his suit's cloaking device, disappearing from sight. The alien commanders were too focused on the battle to notice him approaching. Riker crept closer, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the tension building, but he kept his cool. This was his moment. He reached the first commander and quickly took him out with a silent strike. The alien's body crumpled to the ground without a sound. Riker didn't waste any time. He moved on to the next commander, eliminating him with the same efficiency. The alien soldiers were beginning to notice something was wrong, but it was too late. Riker had already dismantled their leadership, and the rest of the alien forces were in disarray. With the alien commanders neutralized, Riker knew the warship was vulnerable. He quickly made his way toward the ship's exposed underside, where a small hangar bay opened up to reveal a collection of heavy artillery and troops. Riker's exosuit's targeting system locked onto the nearest artillery gun, and with a few quick shots, he disabled it. The aliens had no idea what had hit them. As he took out the remaining guns and soldiers, Riker's path to the warship's core became clearer. The final push was coming, but Riker wasn't finished yet. The aliens would fight to the bitter end, but Riker had already won the war for them. All that was left was to finish what he had started and bring the alien forces to their knees. The battle had reached its peak. The air was thick with smoke, the ground shaken by explosions, and the sky above, once clear, now blotted out by the towering silhouette of the alien warship. Riker stood in the midst of the chaos, breathing heavily, sweat dripping down his face, his heart pounding in his chest. The tides of war were shifting. Just hours ago, the alien forces had been on the offensive, their numbers overwhelming and their technology far superior. But now, the humans, led by Riker's relentless assault, had begun to turn the battle in their favor. The alien warship, once an impenetrable fortress, had been severely crippled. Its outer defenses were in shambles, and its once mighty turrets lay disabled, their weapons no longer able to fire. The elite soldiers, who had once seemed invincible, were scattered and disorganized, their leadership decimated by Riker's precision strikes. He had done what seemed impossible. He had shaken the aliens to their core. But the battle wasn't over yet. The alien forces were regrouping, and despite the chaos, their commanders weren't completely defeated. The warship was still hovering, still capable of unleashing destruction, and its crew was determined to make one final push to reclaim control. If they could just regain their strength and push Riker and the human forces back, they could still turn the tide of the battle. Riker knew this. He understood that the last push was always the hardest, the most dangerous. It was the moment when everything could be lost, or everything could be won. He couldn't afford to hesitate now. The fate of the entire battlefield rested on his shoulders. He wasn't alone, though. The human forces, though outnumbered, were beginning to rally. The mercenaries who had once fought for pay were now fighting for something much bigger: survival, honor, and a chance to protect their home. The desperation in their eyes was gone. In its place was determination. They had been pushed to the brink, but they hadn't broken. They had seen Riker's example, watched as he tore through the alien forces with an unrelenting fury. They saw what a single human could accomplish when pushed to the edge. The tides of war had shifted. Riker stood tall in the center of the battlefield, his exosuit's advanced optics scanning the area for any signs of alien movement. He was bruised, battered, and exhausted, but he was not broken. He had faced down alien warships, elite soldiers, and endless waves of enemies, but he had not faltered. The storm was far from over, but Riker knew he had to be ready for whatever came next. His attention turned back to the warship. It was clear that the aliens weren't going to give up easily. The massive ship had suffered damage, but its central core was still intact. If they managed to get close enough, they could deploy more troops, or worse, unleash their devastating weapons on the human forces. The situation was dire, but Riker had always thrived in moments of chaos. If the warship was going to be taken down, it would have to be now. His mind raced as he began to strategize. He needed a way to get to the warship's core, to deal the final blow, and stop the aliens from regrouping. The humans needed a victory to push the aliens into retreat. If they failed now, the aliens would come back stronger than ever, and they would crush everything in their path. Riker quickly pulled up the tactical map on his exosuit's heads-up display. His eyes flicked over the symbols and lines as he studied the layout of the battlefield. He could see the scattered positions of the alien troops and the crippled state of the warship. The path to victory was clear, but it would be a hard-fought battle to reach it. The alien forces were trying to regroup near the warship, and it wouldn't be long before they mounted a final defense. Riker knew he had only moments before the tide could shift back in the aliens' favor. He had to act fast. With a quick gesture, he sent a signal to the human command, coordinating his movements with the other mercenaries. The plan was simple. They would use the terrain to their advantage, using cover and surprise to push forward, while Riker focused on taking down the warship's remaining defenses. The human forces would push hard, distracting the alien soldiers and forcing them into defensive positions, while Riker made his way to the heart of the warship. It was a dangerous plan, but it was the only chance they had. Riker tapped into his exosuit's communication system and gave a brief but direct order to his team. "We hit them fast. We hit them hard. No hesitation. Move out." With a series of nods, the mercenaries sprang into action. The air was filled with the sounds of weapons firing, the hum of blasters, and the roar of the battle as the humans charged forward. The alien forces, caught off guard by the sudden assault, scrambled to respond. The humans were everywhere, pushing forward with a new ferocity, their morale boosted by the success of their previous victories. Riker, now leading the charge, darted through the battlefield, his suit's thrusters propelling him faster than the enemy could react. His energy blades flashed as he cut through enemy soldiers with precision. Each strike was deadly, each move calculated. His body was moving on instinct now, the training and combat experience kicking in. Every alien soldier he faced fell before him, their weapons no match for his speed and power. But the warship was still in the sky, and it wasn't going to fall easily. The aliens were determined to defend their last bastion of hope. As Riker pushed closer to the warship's core, he could feel the pressure mounting. The warship's defenses were reactivating, and remaining elite soldiers were forming a protective perimeter around the core. The battle was about to reach its climax, and Riker knew that this final moment would decide everything. The humans were fighting with everything they had, but the alien resistance was growing stronger. The final push had begun, and neither side was willing to give up. It was a battle of wills, a clash of ideals. The alien forces had underestimated the human spirit, but they weren't about to make that mistake again. Riker reached the base of the warship, his suit's scanners locking onto the exposed weak points of the ship's hull. He could feel the hum of energy in the air, the power of the ship's weaponry ready to fire. The alien soldiers were closing in, and Riker knew he had only seconds to make his move. He detonated a series of explosives at the base of the warship, the blast sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The ship's hull cracked open, revealing the core. The ship shuddered as its systems began to fail, the power slowly fading. The human forces surged forward, the aliens scrambling to defend the warship, but it was too late. Riker's attack had dealt the death blow, and the warship was no longer a threat. The aliens were broken, their once proud fleet reduced to nothing more than a pile of wreckage. The humans had won. But even as the victory seemed certain, Riker knew this wasn't the end. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. This was only one fight in a much larger conflict, and Riker was ready for whatever came next. As the alien warship exploded in a fiery inferno above him, Riker looked out over the battlefield. The shifting tide had brought victory, but the war was not yet finished. The battle for Earth had just begun. The battlefield lay in ruins, and Riker stood in the center of it all, his armor battered, his face smeared with dirt and blood. The once chaotic environment, filled with the constant sound of blaster fire and explosions, had grown eerily quiet. The alien warship that had once been a symbol of invincibility now lay in pieces, burning in the sky. The air smelled of victory and the heavy scent of smoke. Riker looked around, seeing his team of mercenaries, all exhausted but standing tall, ready for whatever came next. The human forces, once outnumbered and on the brink of defeat, had turned the tide of the war. The battle that had seemed so hopeless hours ago was now over. The humans had won. But as Riker stood there, taking in the sight of the fallen alien forces, he knew this victory was just the beginning. There was still much to be done. The aliens had underestimated humanity's resilience, and now, after a long and grueling fight, the humans were ready to reclaim their place in the galaxy. The human reign had begun. The victory had been hard-fought. The aliens had not gone down easily. Their technology had been advanced, their strategies cunning, and their forces strong. But humanity's spirit, their drive, and their will to survive had carried them through. Riker knew that they had proven something not just to the aliens, but to themselves. They were not weak, not helpless, not the underdogs. The humans were a force to be reckoned with. As Riker turned to face his comrades, he could see the exhaustion in their eyes, the relief that they had made it through. But there was something else there as well. A sense of pride, a feeling that they had done something incredible. It wasn't just a victory in battle. It was a statement. It was a sign that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the most powerful alien forces in the galaxy and come out victorious. "We did it," Riker said quietly, his voice hoarse from the strain of battle. His words were simple, but they carried weight. His team had followed him into the heart of the enemy forces, had fought through the chaos, and had come out on top. One of the mercenaries, a grizzled veteran named Donovan, slapped him on the back. "Damn right we did," he said, grinning. Who knew humans had it in them? Riker smiled back, but the joy of victory was tempered by the harsh reality of the situation. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The aliens would not simply accept defeat. This was just one battle in a much larger war. Riker knew that the alien forces would regroup, would bring more ships, more troops, and more advanced technology. The fight for Earth was far from finished. "Enjoy the moment," Riker told his team. "But keep your heads on straight. The war's not over." The mercenaries nodded, their faces showing a mix of relief and determination. They knew the stakes were high. But for the first time in a long time, they had a reason to believe that they could win, that they could take back what was theirs. The human forces, having pushed the aliens back, began to regroup and rebuild. Their victory was not just about surviving. It was about reclaiming their future. Earth had been under constant threat from alien forces for far too long. The battle they had just won was their first true victory, and it marked the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. Riker and his team had led the charge, but now it was time for the rest of humanity to step up. The mercenaries were no longer just soldiers for hire. They had become the leaders, the symbol of hope for Earth's future. Riker's actions had shown the world what humans were capable of when they worked together, when they refused to give up. And now, it was time for the rest of Earth's forces to join in the fight. The human alliance had been strengthened by their victory. Nations that had once been divided now saw the importance of working together. The threat of the alien invasion had united humanity in a way that nothing else could. The Earth's defense forces, once scattered and disorganized, now operated as one. The mercenaries, once viewed as outcasts and rogues, had become heroes. Riker watched as Earth's military leaders began to coordinate with each other, setting up new strategies and plans for the next phase of the war. The victory was still fresh, but the next steps had to be taken quickly. The aliens would regroup, and they would return. In the aftermath of the battle, there were no celebrations, no loud cheers. The humans knew better than to let their guard down. There was a somberness to the victory, as everyone understood that the true cost of the war was yet to be seen. Families had lost loved ones, cities had been destroyed, and much of Earth's infrastructure had been damaged. But amidst the rubble, there was a growing sense of hope. The humans had proven they could fight back. They had shown the galaxy that Earth was not a planet to be ignored. As Riker and his team were hailed as heroes, they didn't let the praise go to their heads. They were soldiers, and soldiers knew that one victory didn't win a war. Riker remained focused on the task ahead. He knew that the humans would need to continue evolving, to adapt, and to grow stronger if they were going to stand a chance against the might of the alien forces. The first step was to secure Earth's defenses. The warship that had been destroyed was just one of many in the alien fleet. It was a massive victory, but the enemy had many more ships, many more soldiers, and a network of planets they could call upon. The humans had to prepare for a long and brutal conflict. The alien forces would not give up easily, and they would certainly be back in full force. The humans began to rebuild, not just their cities, but their military. Riker and his mercenaries were called upon to train Earth's forces, to share their knowledge of combat, tactics, and strategy. The aliens had technology on their side, but the humans had something more powerful: their ingenuity, their adaptability, and their sheer will to survive. Riker stood in the command center, watching as human soldiers trained with the new technology they had salvaged from the battlefield. It was a sight he hadn't seen before: humans using alien weapons, fighting alongside advanced tech. The tides had turned, and the human race was now armed with tools and knowledge that could help them defend their home. "We've got a long way to go," Riker muttered to himself, staring at the progress unfolding before him. But for the first time, the future didn't seem so bleak. Across the world, the message was clear. Earth was no longer an easy target. The aliens had made a grave mistake in underestimating humanity. Earth's reign in the galaxy was just beginning. The aliens would return, but now the humans were ready. Ready to fight back. Ready to protect their home. Ready to reign over their future. The shifting tide of the war had not only secured Earth's survival, but had forged a new purpose for the human race. They were no longer the underdogs, the helpless prey. They had proven that they could stand up to even the most powerful forces in the galaxy. And as Riker looked at the horizon, he knew one thing for certain. The war for Earth had only just begun, and humanity would not stop fighting until they had claimed victory. The human reign was just beginning.